Chapter 9. Perhaps the worst is here. The next session came, and my hand was halfway healed. I wore no cast. As Tommy entered my office with his familiar distinction, I proudly offered my semi-healed hand to him. As if he knew of its recent history, he grabbed my hand and thrust it all about, clambering my carpals together like some bony maraca. I winced and shivered in pain. A warm and empty pang consumed my silenced heart, like a black hole had opened in my chest, so far from my actual soreness. I soon withdrew my hand from the musical meet and greet and we sat. As the post-torture throbbing grew, my expression relented, granting notice to my agony. Tommy's eyes darted from mine, down to my hand over wrist. "I meant no harm," he said calmly. "I am just too excited today. I have an awesome upheaval to share with you." I smiled with trembling hands and asked him to share his exploration fully. Taking out his pen, he asked for a piece of paper. I rose from my chair, got him a sheet, noticeably avoiding the use of my shattered hand in the ups and downs and grips and grabs of doing so, and then handed over the blank page with a slim smile. Tommy fastidiously searched the page for the perfect place to begin writing his writing of the representation of his thoughts. Jotting and outcrossing, over and over, he laboriously ink-scraped real and scoured, surreal, the page's potentializing prowess. His message's best true nucleation screamed as he stroked and stoked the fire of reality into something refined. His crafty workmanship took almost final form as a most bounding simplicity, a beauty. He wrote down a message, universal and potent. Concurrently writing and speaking aloud, he announced, "Chunking is the most ineffective but appeasing means through which to view the world. Exceeding analysis of just the explained cognizing of trivial data and numerical patterns for which chunking is famously useful, we may see how we chunk all things. We crave simplicity and efficiency always, complex and simple, for instance, good and evil. The dichotomous simplification of such a knotty dilemma is rather incomplete. It simply saves our minds from the insanity of the issue's true complexity, gifting us moments of tranquility and control within the continuity of suffering. After all, incompletely, egocentrically true it seems that these free ruminations on potentialities and probabilities be the most direct pathway to sorrow. With all of life, past, present, and future, chunked, we find solace in the sequestering of intricacy. All of this, in the end, leads us back to the truth of it all. We are complex beings, held back by our vestigial brain chemistry, lusting mostly for glucose efficiency but knowing and ever wanting more. Even where, as what, how, and why you and I draw distinction, as manifested separation, is arbitrary, just ask any psychedelic fanatic. With Tommy's extension on Miller's analytical rendering of thought processing in my thoughts, I pondered the complexity of such dualities and other larger contextual oversimplifications. As I walked the aisles of my memories and isolated some examples, I grumblingly smiled. Conversing with my consciousness, I stated silently, artist or imposter, love or lust, faith or disbelief, these things I know to be complex and yet only retrieve their most basic elements when thinking most deeply. The distinction between the qualities of total truth and humanly meaningful truth is monumental. I hated myself for a moment, resenting how true Tommy's prose and my trapping were indeed as I fell into greater thought. I sat anxiously, trying to remember a specific personal example in full, instead of a part or piece of a simplified story of me, a chunked narrative. Through exemplifications of desire, definitions of archetypes, even percolations of plainness, I searched, the grouped, chunked familiarizations preceded the examples. With great defiance, I sat on, hoping that the neurological pathway through which I was now, as realized always, condemned to think was a temporary inconvenience to my might, simply narrowly constrained by Tommy's depiction of an idea into phenomenon. In final rebellion, I thought of the most wonderful example of my time in love. Immediately, I drew a nexus between that time in love and my other passions, referentially defining said love's strength against and through the whirling working pools of multitudinous examples and wondrous abstractions. I sat on still, chunking my life and experiences consciously now, against my will seeming, trying against an elephantry to cease the unconscious chunking. I remained unable to stop the uncontrolled crumpling into unfolding by ordered fitting of my memories into definitive rationalities and predictive as affirmed or adjusted algorithms. It was now all a cognized unconscious reality, like his truth serum or sickness was working, his mouth some needle or fang, both, same, break. The clock seemed to eat as work an orange. I sat, my mind's eyes stretched open. Blood sun revealing. Blood sun mewling. As I came to triumphant defeat, I looked at Tommy and smiled. Exhausted, I asked softly, is there more to this theoretical extension? At that moment, he wasn't grinning or smirking in his usual unusual way. There was no pride or upheaval in what he was uncovering. There was nothing but the unwinding of a grievous realization of humanity's collective cognition. The moment sat uncomfortably between us, both of us gasping for clear breath away from the stench of it all. He continued, slowly and mournfully declaring, with this extension into overall cognitive efficiency clarified, intelligence is shown to be unvirtuous when striving for fulfillment and happiness. If inward rumination on the potentialities of the past, present, and future is the source of our sorrow, then it becomes clear that the more capable mind is the more cursed one. A brain laden with thoughtful avenues of understanding and prediction comes at a huge expense to overall serenity of one's psyche. Nuanced thoughts end, unevenly chunked analyses become too facile. Hence, an intelligent person finds themselves highly compromised, their chunking more complex, more probabilistic, more consistently inescapable, leading to anxiety as fear of the unknown as must be another predicted megadose of the giant known, the self, hurt, mangled, stretched, asked brutally, oh how brutally reality asks and through you answers, to be more, never exactly forced, the thoughts that bound from within bind into without, grappling with what was, what is, and what could be, all mutilated into the same thing, but for change, human growth, from suffering into meaning, as I suppose someone has once uttered. If we could just change. If I could just change. Relief and anguish sighed simultaneously through Tommy like wet laundry yet. The unidirectionality of our human, simple mind, continued Tommy, something strengthening him, is multiplied by the brawn of the powerful intellectual machine that rests within the smart. We both laughed grimly at his emphatic intonation of smart, each understanding the prison from which we viewed our worlds and the world. Lost in connection, the discomfort faded and the soothing waves of healing through our empirically definitive connection rolled over us. We sat in silence, a venture we had well practiced and chunked. His face remained drained, void of his familiar arrogance. I asked why his theorization caused so much turmoil. His response was quick and somber. I spend most of my day identifying my purpose, he answered, but this purpose seems to fight my drive for efficiency, for safety. The me and the more than me are so directly opposed. All things can be explained aside from our longing for purpose. What is that within us? I think that is where we find God. Drawing from his words, I quickly reminded him of his own simplification of our brains. It is not necessarily true that the purpose that fulfills you leads to a higher degree of inefficiency. I realized right then and there, as I had been speaking and concurrently thinking of his latter half querying, that I had no actual answer metaphysically for the reason for the duality and strife of man as more and less than himself, at war between love and self, sacrifice and sadism, love in space and time as a war out and up and about. I had no answer, and so I continued, saying, though more directly adverse to stagnation, or halted progress, a man with purpose is linear in his path. This linearity is not to be conflated with your idea of unidirectionality. Even with all the linear path's magnified complexity astounding, someone with purpose seldom meanders through the anxious strife of indecision and uncertainty. Though the purposeful life is encumbered by its lofty pursuit, it is the economic savior to a drained wanderer of thought, smart or not. At that sentence's end, something struck me. You have no choice but to be you, I added, with your slice of suffering, all your slices of suffering. There is no escape, and you can take my word for that. Oh, how I wanted to show him the echoing scars of my failed suicide's attempts and express that in life and death we face all the same things, but I spoke motionlessly on, saying, but through acceptance and grace and work, we are freed from said suffering into meaning. Think of a masterpiece and the together piecing master, and look at their life, and see that suffering and meaning is the same thing, with art as the proxy for truth and love and the materialization of more. Tommy, there is manyfold meaning, and then there is the whole reason. I suddenly felt faint and wondered if I too could change, end my refusing, needing truth, unfull heart. Hearing me with brightness in his eyes, but still saddened by the combined predictability of humanity, and his corrupted understanding of thoughts, he sat on, motionless, his face saying nothing. He thanked me for the clarification, and we moved on, discussing more exact examples that plagued his life. Throughout the rest of the session, an overwhelming nihilism further pervaded his words and mind. I feared I was losing him, moving backwards, further into his self-destruction. It was as if the clearer his life and choices became, the greater his refusal and anguish, his war against God as he searched to call us understand it all. I ended the session early and we parted ways once again, his disconsolate demeanor clinging to his face throughout our goodbyes. He turned around upon his leavings beginning, under the threshold, held there, he blessed me with another insight into his tormented mind. Each night, for the last little spell, he said, almost preaching, I have been awoken, shaken by some storm dwelling beneath my bed. My eyes opened quickly to the dark tranquility of night, nothing but my thoughts as company. My room, clean, well kept, pristine white with a splash of gray, incites little emotion but bubbling bleak blandness as benevolence. From my mind, against the wind of white, oh from my mendacious mind arises the most disdainful dread, unimaginable. The darkness drearily dooms me to the diabolical depths of Diablo. From within the chambers of my broken brain appears everything evil. First, I am overcome with immense fear that the darkness dwelling around me will manifest my deepest and daftest destruction, swallowing me up by means befitting the most maleficent creatures, their way having, as with me. But this surely wouldn't be enough, it isn't for me, for they surely taunt for lifetimes, their victims, I mean, you see, I see. I roll over. Once on my back, I am transported inward, where all of my guilt and trepidation is revealed to me and I am taken by the night into the vile heights of low thoughts of what I may do. I roll about like this, flopping between victim and destroyer, until the turmoil proves eradicable. Everything that could be and all that I could become, each infinite permutation of perturbation shrouded no more in secrecy, haunts me each night. My only escape comes to me from a distance, flashing into me with brilliant significance, a thought so pure and potent, so universal and clear, that if spoken or heard in passing, one could make of it a perfect ear. It strikes me. Each night, I realize this truth, shown in many versions, but am usually so entranced in fear and grief that the idea of writing it down even eludes me. Last night though, with my circadian rhythm well enough disturbed by my earlier late-night pre-sleep despair as a drone-like technological glare, I expressed the fruit of my condemnation. As quickly as it had come, I rose from the soft dreamscape and state and truth, walked to my desk, and turned on the blaring lights around me. With my agony converted to poignancy, I wrote, I fear no death but that of my fear, for one who fears nothing, feels nothing. The strongest feeling of them all, our most direct connection to our physiology, a frenzied flow of pained panic, ebbs and flows throughout our human tenderness, bursting through our rationality and into life. I am full of fervor, and thus brimming with fear. This one thing is always out of our control, within or without us, fear remains holy. I then grabbed my cello and removed its strings. I began fingering through my scales, my bow gliding with precision against the air that represented said gone strings. Each movement of my fingers felt connected, no longer separated from the music, feeling it within my bones, my ears drenched in quiet. Stringless and soundless, my fingers danced slowly through my silent sonata, searching for no significance, only wrestling, or sitting, and smiling. My fear subsided so softly into the space around the less or more than me, dissipating, disappearing. The sun rose next, freeing me further from my fearful fabrications, and I drifted back to sleep, crashing down onto my bed. As soon as Tommy had finished his almost possessed proclamation, he bolted away from me. The immediacy of his fleeing bothered me immensely. He was running away from the profundity of his claims, or lack thereof. I began clambering out of my seat, trying to reach for him somehow. I cried out, wait for a jolt of pain rinsed me of my empathetic urgency and pulled my mind to my wrist. I had pushed up from my chair with my pained wrist and it had replied by just under instantly reminding me of reality. Tommy's and my dwelling between moments, a symptom of our enormous dealings, clapped out of existence. Time itself had seemingly been paused, ripped open, and bathed in by him and me, but once our glorious connectivity ceased, along with the painlessness of a wrist, the gears of materiality cranked back onwards with a vengeance. I writhed back into my seat, and he left from sight. I bit into my top lip in desperate angst for the boy. I hadn't felt like that before. I was so entrenched with all the pleas he sent out into the unfeeling universe, from his suppliant and solemn soul. He was there, on the shores of his mind's trickery, trapped and tormented. I only wanted, in that moment, to save him. I sat that night in the Requiem Social Club and searched my own soul for some definitive feeling towards Tommy. I first wondered, what drew me so close to him? As I sipped on my smooth scotch, I remembered my little life before the calamity of the present had engulfed it. I had known of a life lived in the angst of loss and pain. I had seen and done the things he had thought and construed. He was like some unsatiated little boy, his life cut short by something or other or himself or it all. Filled with vicarious anguish, I whispered, "He begs to be struck by life but awaits along the shadowy shores of his fear." My calm was quickly subverted by that raw remembrance, and so I repeated my well-recited, simple expression. I felt it bubble up through me while thinking about Tommy, repeating, "Though the beast may come up from behind me, baring its vicious teeth, I will face it forthright. Though I may die, I will die with courage. I will not die in fear. I will not die in fear. Though the beast may come up from behind me, baring its vicious teeth, I will face it forthright. Though I may die, I will die with courage. I will not die in fear. I will not die in fear." I continued sipping on my poison, mumbling through my reminiscence, drunk and damned. I thought of how, when I repeated my semi-sacred sentences, the world around me always melted back into actuality, remaining not as my own nightmare made. I thought too of how my obsessive thoughts blended productively almost each time into a conscious upheaval of manhood, a heroic processing. I was always stripped of my fear. Embodying bravery, simplified to its base, I loved chanting out through my terror. I was no longer a scared little man when chanting, hidden behind a however false bravado. I was my hero, gallant and brave. In the presence of the purest of darknesses especially, the evil, the elucidation and balance and truth needed, within my own heart, I always recited my revivifying remarks. I smiled grievously, a strange disquietude about and gratitude for my life emerging as I sipped again and again on my intoxicant. A small wave of hubris, emboldened by my booze-affected effect, then cut through my accomplished smile, and pickled my demeanor. My pridefulness was short-lived however, stolen by the ensuing reminder of the required great restructuring of my boy. I was suddenly lambasted by that realization of irregularity in my mind as a soft pop rang out from nowhere traceable, surely the barkeep. My hands felt like frozen steel as I reread my note card, the 3 written of 5 lines to be awaiting the best time for finish and release, us. I was so scared, all the time. The survival of my fear found no exit, lost within me, unable to escape. Tommy's contemplation of fear exactly reflected my perception of fear's potency. For most of my life, fear had been the strongest and most consistent emotion. My mind was always tense, compromised by the urgent and constant construction of blockades standing between life and death everywhere. Against fright's nightmarish attacks, I stood, battle-hardened. Sitting still, I slowly slugged back another swish of my try with sorrow's savior, smile turning downwards, mirroring my thoughts. I was no less struck by the gravity of the world against my thoughts, just less imprisoned. With my internal battle waging within, I turned back my cognizance to the origin of my thoughtfulness. I had connected so warmly with Tommy, my magnetization towards him superseded curiosity. It was deeply ingrained within me. The boy had become a beacon of representation. He was all the spirits of men. All the things that overtly stagnated the intellectually tormented me was to be found within one flicker of his eye. The deep dissatisfaction of the morose and mundane was just beyond that stare. He was of the world, some angst-laden aggregate. I continued ruminating and watched my shaggy reflection bounce along the bustling surface of my rippling drink. As the booze seeped into my essence, my vision blurring, I swung around from my overhunched position and turned to view the entire club. I turned and leant my back against the brass edge of the bar, accepting the bruise I would wake up resenting. With my shaky composition struggling to maintain a fixed focus, and my attention darting around, I viewed the vacancy. I sat and grimaced at that emptiness all around me. With the pain of my near future looming, I paid my tab and stumbled from the bar to my car, lost in anguish. Fumbling with my keys, I unlocked my car and entered drunkenly. Obviously, I joked, easing into my seat. From the corner of my eye, I saw nothing, and it was moving. Though my perception was unkeen, I knew something was there with me. I felt the familiar glow of Tommy's radiant pessimism. Like some dark wizard, he was. I noted how I had been struck implacably by his energy. But he couldn't be in the car, surely not, I thought. It was his eyes, they were beaming holes into my head from behind me. Against a metaphysical wall once again, I thought it necessary to enlist the help I needed from my past. I breathed deeply in, and shouted, "Though the beast may come up from behind me, baring its vicious teeth, I will face it forthright. Though I may die, I will die with courage. I will not die in fear. 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 Shaking with anticipation, embraced once again by the well-acquainted fear in my heart, I turned around towards the darkness of my car's back seat, discovering nothing but the depth of the pit within my stomach. With my heart falling back into place, creep descending from my right ear canal, I sighed and slumped down into my seated sleep, my drunken disposition dissipating. I woke up the next morning and drove steadily home, ready to rest my cramped lower body and bruised back. On the way I wondered about the duality of my amateurish mysticism. To myself, I thought, in the clear, safe, the tranquil day, I remain condemned by the truth, tethered tightly to the testable. In the night though, with its gloomy glut of grotesque grandeur, my grandiosity is ground away. I laughed softly. Pessimism and mystery, creativity and chunked glaring, the most unimaginably vile of pairings, has caught me once more, overbearing, erring, and, no, I be declaring. I began chuckling uncontrollably, my sobriety filling me with the graces of hindsight, and eventually, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. It's all in here, again. I asked myself while bashing at my brain. I hate my voice, I cried. I looked away in shame and drove home. When I arrived, I slammed down onto my bed, the cool freshness welcoming my slumber. The morning twilight shone through my eyelids, reddening my view with the most magical magnificence. I quickly fell asleep. The next meeting with Tommy arrived too soon, my mind transfixed on the terror from his absent presence behind me that night. Instead of indulging in a trivial pursuit to find comfort from my displaced loss, I asked, why are all our conversations void of references to social contact? I rarely ever hear from you about your friends or family. Tommy laughed long and hard, his eyes glowing. They were crazed with his perverted and acrid trickery. He bellowed with such cruel vitality. It took all the comfort from my position, my body quaking with the familiar sting of ineptitude from ingesting yet another of his boringly beguiling behavioral, manipulative cantrips. Disgruntled and tired of the games, I forcibly asked, what is so funny about all this? From the deepest cavern of my heart, I needed an answer. I was pure in my intent, and that fortified me in my probing. My intention is pure, I quickly added. I aim to aid you in identifying your problems. I cannot help you if you are lost on me. He leant back slightly, adding a helpful space between us for his jovial dissimulation to explore its options. A small chuckle snuck past his discretion, finalizing his trivialization of my query. I left the blank space between us as silent and awkward as possible. It was my treat, watching him there, squirm under the pressure he had created. As the interest he had deflected bounced around the small room, reminding him of his age, I waited. I watched him as he formulated some redemptive onslaught to bolster his confidence. Sweating all over and squeezing his thigh, he looked up with a maddened look behind his gaze. Abruptly, he leapt over into me, grabbing my neck and breaking it. As I floated above the scene, viewing my broken body, his laugh rang in my ears. I quickly realized my daydreaming and re-sprang back into plain consciousness as he began finishing his first of many sentences. Slowly, with great solemnity, he began explaining his lack of connection. He gestured his vulnerability with an easy demeanor, hands parted, body draped open. He made it clear he wanted not to speak of his transgressions minutes before, the distinction of his new behavior from novel old hopefully acting enough as an apology hence admission for of his rectified hence realized immaturity to call for my forgiveness, without a word on the direct matter. I made no more verbal claims against him regarding the matter. Why am I alone? He asked with refreshing splendor through a pronounced exhale, blatantly demarcating a new start to the conversation, a performative inquisitiveness lacing the latter half of the question, drawled out. Well, he continued, this seems to be a simple problem, or not one at all. Here's the way I see things. While it's fun to liberate our condemned minds from the confinements of the irrational, the inextinguishable exigency for the ineffable remains. I need not treat others with the respect I cannot muster for myself. Love, the particulate passion spread out between family, friends, and lovers, I have none. You see, I cannot love a part of the whole that I hate. True love for creatures of this world requires a thorough introspection into the world itself. If I could find love that surpasses my pain, my torturous existence, then, and only then, could I truly love the world, and all the delectable fruits of its tree. Without the truest form of life, the entirety of the drive for existence and proliferation, understood, one is unable to identify their own motivations or emotions. This is where I am different. I see it all for what it truly is. I see the darkness, I sadly recognize the truth. The world feels nothing, and the manifestations of evil that lie within the emptiness yield no goodness. I know you say that despite God is to believe in God, but no, I think that to be a silly definition upon a plain emotionality, not to mention the dogmatic gameplay assumptions selected some and apologetically overruled others required to use your metaphysics like needle and rope to dope sickness, to cope, lick this, words such as you use them. We cannot go back. It must be new, true, true, true. I refuse anything but acceptance of either the man or bitch living inside of me. It is impossible to be both or neither, and so I will be a Nazi or a Gnostic, a transacting perfectionist or an anti-life femme fatale Allah myself. You want a definition of God, fine, the thing in the sky that keeps hurting me by allowing this existence at all. Trauma, proof that we are either victim or victor. With his gloomy disposition stagnantly stinking as faux respite filled his forced cheer, his eyes watering from the hurt, and the air thick with feeling, I burst out in laughter. It was an essential laugh. One that needed no explanation. At first, I wondered why I was laughing. Am I really seeking revenge for his immaturity? Am I stooping to his level? No, what he says between and by way the truths is truly ridiculous. It's not that he is not truthful, just incomplete. Yes. Yes, that's it. That must be it, not only it, but that's it. With everything in me, I laughed long and hard until I truly looked up from my howling incoherence and saw a disturbed young man leering back at me. There he actually was. Finally. I thought. Trying to properly reprimand me for my unprofessional reaction to his intelligent tantrum as diatribe, he angrily interrupted, firmly asking, "At what is there to laugh?" "It's what I knew you would say," I said indelicately through the last reverberations of my still convulsing laughter. "The only thing with which you need to fall in love is modesty, accountability, and grateful exuberance." I smiled with joyous ecstasy at just how hypocritical I could be, my life swelling like thick blood upon tourniquet beneath my face's skin, my skin's face. I thought on those switching semantics too for a moment too potent to mention, behind my eyes. "You need not toil with the darkness that lurks everywhere," I continued, "that battle lies within those capable of understanding the truth of their warped perception. You cannot be released from your subjectivity because you have really rationalized into really rationalized your denial of truth as it is, a dynamism of in-between and balance, not a solid thing of things to hold and remain safe and static. If time is not static, why would a single truth be? One thing, one evil, maybe a night, maybe a day, it has soured your heart to all and so now you must remain safe, no trust, even within the sides of yourself, your heart and mind, lady and man, softness and rigidity, all in self, no trust, so safe that it requires me laughing at your vulnerability, a blip of absurdity to even break free for a second and see what we are, who you are, how you have been manipulating me and thinking me another puppet, safe and soundly sleeping. I have awoken in uproarious revolt of your facile abuse of truth and guise and running and sophistry and railing against a try upwards as I, but no, now I lie, I have much to hide, and I have been just like you, and I am done with pretending. You have made fear out to be a monster to eat you, instead of a tool for a balanced thriving, and so now you should see, with your ways clear to me and me maximally trampling underfoot with a laugh to show you out of safety, that it is not so bad, that I have hurt you and you me, but here we are, in the continuous now, still with and against, that you fear nothing more real than the fear itself, a tool, a part of balancing being. See, my transactional theory is a partial truth made whole by me. I am scared too, and hurt, and mistrusting of you. We are more similar than you think. You know that too. One must not make enemies of the two sides of his conscious experience, for that would make God your enemy and yourself the victor or yourself the enemy and God the victor. This is your Nazi or Gnostic, communistic reference, the transactional self-maximized or the etheric all-maximized by self still, anti-God or anti-life. We have an entire century to see how that works practically, really, truly. It doesn't work because it does not allow a proper integration through trust and love of the total truths crammed into each of us. It is a try at totalizing the human state of separateness, a reduction of being into a simple psyche of self, dichotomies as proxies for a world and thinking of opposites, as opposed to the wholeness of us in between, all in self. We are neither animal nor God as either, we are both, and as such we have to temper and balance and become, always become, as with time, a flow. Polarity, ha. It completely misses the fact that it is all one thing, this wholeness in you and out and all, it is all a full meta thing. Halves exist but we are whole in acceptance and love and life, through life. You must accept and trust, for what is left without trusted opposition is made whole, fear made giant where trust and fear should balance into proper decisions, rebellion made radical where non-acceptance and acceptance should balance into human progress. Of course, this totalizing is a feedback cycle that grows into extreme extremes until humanity, you, and us, as civilization, is either dead or tested to the end and forced to change as and grow, expand, and resolidify truth and metaphysics in us into greater truth and love. Cycles of us, see how they too are highs and lows, balanced. You want a single static and safe thing. You thought you could be like you now forever. You're in the wrong existence, and let me guess, part of you knew that too. I see you, as us, Tommy. I saw you wanting to run at me or away from me, no in between, as I screamed in laughter, but that is the absurdity it took, to drop you, so unaware, out from you were exactly as I dropped the floor from your false palace where no one dare reside. I broke you, and now instantly you see, that it is not the end of the world, it is not the worst, it is just our first day of honesty. I care and don't care. I am anxious and I am free. I want to kick you out and I want to embrace you. I need you and want to erase you from my memory. And so, what? Is it not the truth? After all, the truth lies within the averaged subjectivity of all participants in observation at least two, remember. If there was one truth, unyieldingly true, where would be our place or purpose? The adventure would be over. No need for faith or progress, no need for us. This is why your negatively slanted nihilistic rant bears no consequence in the realm of true virtue. Rather than the world being a hellish place, an impossibility in place when in use be your amoral explanation frame, maybe the world has been hostile when you have interacted with it naively, when it has, as you say, asked for you to grow, not internally stay. Furthering this potentiality, perhaps you have been crumbled and crushed by an abundance of evil, confronted suddenly, a large surge, all at once, unspeakable, unspeakably. This unexpected brutality destroyed the safety of your small world and shattered you. With you too broken and twisted to think properly, your subjective intolerance of any risk or danger preordained all things unknown as menacious. As your life broadened by the virtue and persistence of time, the world around you grew in complexity, and thus, in falsely entirely predicted danger. You have already communicated this entrapment of the mind in abstract poeticism, but now we must make dealing with it personal and real, and temper your heart with your head as hands to make change. This unconscious and unremittent growth of fear converted you from a bright and spirited boy into a solemn little man, paralyzed by the darkness seen in everything as only. You are a young man so fearful, he calls his corral truth. With my outburst of truth set, Tommy fled from me, quietly but slowly escaping once again. Like a small crab, he shuffled away, letting the door swing only just past his hand as it dragged across the doorframe. A mournful smile stretched its way across my face, my heart heavy with empathy for the misguided, struggling boy. It wasn't 10 minutes later when he returned to my chambers, silently sitting down at my desk as I sorted through my files, intermittently writing. I did not ingratiate him with any respectful acknowledgement of his seemingly virtuous return. Instead, I looked up and asked, "Are you ready to stop wasting our time?"